Is pleasure a problem? This week we looked at a message about three men and their mission, and one of the men that we looked at was a guy named Herod, and his goal or his mission was to destroy or be destructive. And one of the things that made him destructive was his insecurity. And as Brother Mike was talking about insecurity, he talked about two things. He spoke about materialism and hedonism, which is those two things. Materialism is just stuff and finding our identity and our security in stuff, and hedonism is finding our identity and security in pleasure. And I thought that was really interesting, that those two things, because Herod had a focus on those things in his life, materialism, stuff, hedonism, pleasure in his life, that led to insecurity in his life. It's really a problem. Pleasure can be a problem. And Ravi Zacharias actually said the problem of pleasure is probably more of a problem in today's society in America than the problem of pain, which has typically been one of the biggest problems that we've seen in Christianity. And so what do we do with this problem of pleasure? What do we do with materialism? What do we do with hedonism? And why is it a problem? Well, the reason it's a problem is because exactly what Brother Mike said. It leads to insecurity, which leads us to doing things that are really destructive. Really destructive. Insecurity breeds destructive living. And so how can we combat these two things? And so I just want to write these two things down: materialism and hedonism. We may say, well, I'm not materialistic, I'm not hedonistic, but in America it's really challenging for us because we have so many blessings and so many gifts that God has given us. And so how can we figure out if there's something in our lives that we're living very materialistic with or hedonistic with? And I think the questions that we can ask for both of these things is, what are the things that kind of makes us cringe to lose when it comes to stuff and when it comes to pleasure? If it kind of makes us cringe, we're like, I don't think I could do without that thing. There may be some materialism and some hedonism creeping in to our lives. And listen, that always leads to insecurity. I want to read you a verse about this very thing. A guy named Solomon, he was the richest man who ever lived. And there's a point in Ecclesiastes where he's talking and he says, listen, I became so great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also remained with me. All that my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure, for I took pleasure in all my struggles. This was my reward for all my struggles. When I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile and a pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. Here he's talking about the idea of materialism and hedonism, and he chased all the things and all the pleasures, and what he resulted in was, he said, finding your identity and your security in those things, it's like grabbing after the wind. You will always be left insecure. You will be left insecure. So how do we combat materialism and hedonism in our life? I think a very good thing that we probably don't do a lot is fasting. How many of us actually fast? And so what thing in my life right now that it makes me cringe to think to lose? What is the pleasure that makes me cringe to think to lose? And let's fast from it this weekend. I want you to sit down with your family or Thursday or Friday and say, on Saturday, we're going to fast from one thing and one pleasure that we find in our life that kind of makes us cringe. We're going to do it for the whole day. Maybe you're going to do it for a couple of hours. And during that time, don't just not do or play or experience this thing or this pleasure, but actually gear that time towards studying the Word or listening to worship music or going out with your family and experiencing nature, the thing that God created for us to enjoy and point us back to Him. I'll just tell you what God's already laid on my heart. I'm not going to watch college football, which is a pleasure for me, on Saturday, which is going to be tough because I really like Alabama football.
What you talking about, Mr. D?
And the thing is my phone. I'm going to set my phone down and I'm not going to touch it all day Saturday. So those are are the two things that I'm going to step away from. Share with us in the comments what you and your family are gonna put down and fast from this week, so we can move away from materialism and hedonism from creeping into our lives. If you want to check out our last video, click here. If you want to follow us on social media, just find us at SBC Clinton. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here.